one thing, what would you want people to know about her?
The world lost an excellent teacher of children.
A very sweet, gifted, talented, loving, full of humor woman.
That was the whole thing about her, was her love of children. It started even before that, but she was very active in working with kids, special needs kids.
Elaine thought so much of those kids at Violet. She would repeatedly, when she'd come home, she'd say, "Mom, I just want that much more, just that much more for these kids because they have nothing." They said, "Well, you know that they caught the kid," and I said, "The kid? Oh yeah, it was one of the kids from Pilot Center." And I said it was one of her kids, and it just absolutely blew me away.
Was this just a simple case of a predator just preying on your daughter?
I don't think
Alfred
so.
Brian Mitchell had been released from Lloyd Raider 17 days before she was murdered.
He'd been in for 2.5 years for raping Maria Bustos,
Yeah.
and it only took him 17 days to resort back to his old behavior.
We were strongly advised not to see her after the murder because the damage to her face was so great. So I never really got to say goodbye to my daughter, and I didn't get to give her that last hug and kiss, and I really needed to do that.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone in chat. We have Catnip and JD. Thank you for being here, you guys. I really appreciate it. I know there's been some inconsistency lately, and so um, that you showed up tonight to be in the chat and hear about this case is very much appreciated. So thank you very much. Um, so tonight, what I'm going to do, we left off, chapter 7 was the next chapter that we were going to be reviewing. And so that's one good thing about this book. There are some chapters that kind of carry, some cases that kind of carry over into other chapters, but in this particular case, that's not the situation. So that's a bit helpful. So this week, like I said, we are reviewing Chapter 7 in Death and Justice. And I am going to kind of go over some notes that Cherie, some summary notes about the case that Cherie has shared with us. So this chapter is called DNA Doesn't Lie. And this is it's a case about a 1991 murder of a college student, Elaine Marie Taylor, or God, Elaine Marie Scott was her name. And she worked at a recreation center for disadvantaged youth where she was a volunteer. And she had been alone at the center during the lunch hour. Everyone else had gone out for lunch, so she was alone. And Alfred Brian Mitchell, who was an 18-year-old young kid, really, who had just been released from a juvenile detention center for the rape of a 12-year-old girl, arrived at the center. So there's lots of questions around that, naturally, that, he had raped a 12-year-old girl and now he's free. Well, I believe it was because he was under the age of 18 when he committed the crime. And I don't know, I don't recall exactly how old he was when he committed the crime, but he did, was evidently only sentenced to until he was 18 years old, and then he was going to be released. Um, anyway, he went to the center while everybody else was gone from the building at lunch, and the center, but when the center director returned from lunch, she found Elaine Scott nearly naked, laying on the floor, and she had been hit with a golf club and a wooden coat rack, and she had been stabbed in the neck 5 times with a what is that called that you use for like geometry and help me guys, compass. And she'd been stabbed in the neck with the compass 5 times. There were 2 witnesses that who knew that Mitchell that had seen Mitchell hanging around the center that day, and Mitchell said that he had seen 2 guys giving her a hard time, so he left the center altogether. And so you've got conflicting. There's 2 witnesses, but everybody's saying something different about everybody. So later, after the witnesses said that they had seen Mitchell, the police found Mitchell at his home with his mother, and the police had Mitchell. Mitchell gave his version of the events, and the police said, well, show us where these 2, where do you think these 2 guys that you claim you saw there might have left fingerprints at the center. And so they took him to a couple of homeless shelters to see if Mitchell could identify these 2 men, and he couldn't identify him. So the police just said, okay, well, give us your sneakers and that you were wearing, and then come back to the station, tomorrow. And Mitchell went to the station. He waived his Miranda rights, and he was questioned for 4 hours. And he voluntarily surrendered hair and blood samples. And then they told him after some point that his sneakers matched the bloody footprints at the scene. Mitchell admitted to them that he had been present at the scene, but that he had not murdered Elaine Scott. So I'll kind of leave it at that for this second, and first ask Alice if she has anything that she would like to add just to that much so far, if you remember.
Well, one of the witnesses, his name was Alan Biggs, and he was a contractor, and it was him that had said that he'd seen Mitchell at the door, and I think Mitchell was in the juvenile detention centre, so he must have been the ages between 15 and 8. I don't know how your juvenile centres works, but here, as soon as you turn 18, you move from the juvenile detention centre to like an adult sort of centre. So if he was a juvenile, he must have been really young, and he did the 3 years.
Right. Yeah, it's the same here. Well, I shouldn't say for all states or cities or counties, but it's pretty much the same here in the States. Once a juvenile who has been sentenced to a juvenile detention center, once they have served the time, because they can't keep them in the juvenile detention center past 18, because at 18 they're legally adults. So they either move them to an adult prison, depending on the sentence and the crime, I suppose, or they will just kick them out, which is what they did with Brian David Mitchell, or Brian David Mitchell is his name. I get some of the names really, really confused because there's so many. I'm going to show you guys a picture of Mitchell. I don't know exactly what year this was, but this is a picture of what Mitchell looked like at some time. Let's see. And it was really disturbing to me the first time I saw this image. I'm sorry, I don't really know how to make that any bigger. I tried to download it in a bigger format, but it wouldn't let me. But anyway, I don't remember exactly how old he was at this point. But I will also now show you a picture of him, a current picture of him as of, I want to say just a few days ago, sometime. Well, it was sometime in late March, so it's pretty. It's about as recent as it can get. So this was what he looks like now, as a death row inmate. again, not a good copy of that, but you can see that he's certainly aged. Now, one of the interesting things about Mitchell is he's still on death row, and he actually had, I believe his sentence was overturned 3 different times. So going back to the notes, so when they told Mitchell that his bloody footprints were found at the scene, and um, that the they knew that from his sneakers. So in the crime lab, in the infamous Oklahoma City crime lab, there was semen found inside the victim's body and on the sheet that was used to carry her from the scene. The sexual assault evidence was sent to the FBI for DNA testing, and 3 weeks later, he was charged with rape and sodomy, as well as murder, based on our favorite chemist, Joyce Gilchrist. Um, she had Gilchrist, based on Gilchrist testing, preliminary blood typing and electrophoresis. The FBI DNA tests had not even come back yet. So she, as is true to form with Joyce Gilchrist, she she likes to testify about hair evidence and things like that, which we now know, and wasn't too much even longer after she was fired that they were knowing and testifying that hair evidence was basically junk science. Um, so Mitchell's attorney was a man by the name of Jim Rowan, and he had offered to plead Mitchell out to murder, but he wouldn't do it to the rape because, uh, oh my goodness, Brian Mitchell, or David, what's his name? Brian, I can't ever say it right. Here's the problem with this Mitchell case. In Utah, there was a man by the name of Brian David Mitchell who kidnapped. It was an infamous case here and probably nationwide at very least. But Brian David Mitchell here in Utah kidnapped and held hostage for 9 months a girl by the name of Elizabeth Smart. So it's like, and I actually, I don't know if you want to call it the misfortune or what you want to call it, but I actually worked with Brian David Mitchell when I worked at the state hospital, because he and his wife were both there. So anyway, when I'm trying to say um, Brian Alfred Mitchell instead of Brian David Mitchell, I'm getting the 2 names mixed up, so I apologize. But anyway, he had Mitchell said that he didn't rape her, but that if he would be willing to plead out to murder, but that he didn't rape her. But he would admit to the rape if he wouldn't be sent to death row. Um, so there were several witnesses who were able to place Mitchell at the center, at near the scene and near the victim's car. So he was willing to plead. He was willing to plead out, and he would plead to rape um, if it would keep him from going to death row. And if you recall, way back in the beginning of the book, I don't remember which chapter, but there are some circumstances which are just that make the will make a case a death penalty case. And I don't remember all of them at this point, but one of them is a recurring pattern of violent crimes and exigent circumstances and things like that. And so it's really interesting to me that um, Mitchell is agreeing to say he raped her, even though he didn't, if it would save his life, when rape is a component that would make send a murderer to death row. And so, I'm not sure what what the idea was there, but I'm not an attorney, so, who am I to say? It sounded weird that he did that, or that his attorney allowed it, but he did. And so, as usual, um, Joyce Gilchrist testified at trial that blood matching the victim's ABO type were found on Mitchell's sneakers and his sweatpants. And blood matching Mitchell's type was found on the victim's jeans and panties, and fiber matching his jacket was found in her fingernail. And Gilchrist also said that the sperm and semen samples from the victim's body, were consistent with both Mitchell's and the victim's boyfriend. And I am trying to remember his name, and I sure can't. I want to say it was something like Taylor or Tyler.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Taylor, something Taylor.
Right. Yeah. So, the boyfriend and another man had admitted to having sex with her at the time, but the boyfriend said it.
Philip
Phillips.
Taylor.
Yeah, Philip Taylor. I knew there was a T in there somewhere. I just didn't know where and how. That's pretty darn good. So the boyfriend and another man admitted to having sex with her at the time, but her boyfriend said that it had been over a week since he had had sex with her. So Gilchrist stated in her testimony that viable semen or sperm sample would only be present for up to 12 hours after sex. Now, listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not none of that stuff. But 12 hours? Come on now. Just when I read that, I was like, no, that don't sound right to me. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it's just kind of, I don't know. It just didn't. I was almost offended that the jury even bought it, but they did, so it's whatever. But Alice, Alice or Kay, what can you add to what we've discussed so far?
Nothing. You've actually covered it quite good. It was what was his name? The other man. Try to find that again. Kochi or something like that.
Yeah, it was a weird.
Yeah, it was a weird name. Michael Harjoki.
Right.
Was the other one's name, and as you say, they were reported to have had sexual relations with her in that time. And I mean, if that was the case, then if the DNA was lasting that that long, which I doubt, I mean, surely there would be other evidence there, other DNA. But I mean, it's the fact that Gilchrist is all over this again. Testifying to things that she's not even experienced in, never mind anything else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, she's always got to have, it just goes to her arrogance and her narcissism, really.
Yeah.
So, it was disturbing to, the case was disturbing, and it gets even a little more disturbing as we go on here. But yes, there were other possible suspects. Surprise in this case, as far as the rape was concerned. So Gilchrist stated that the FBI DNA test on the semen and sperm was evidence was inconclusive. But when the samples were sent to a private lab, to private lab chemists, they were able to associate them. So, that was another great thing about Joyce Gilchrist. Didn't matter what other professionals in the field there were, contradicting her. She always, they were wrong and she was right, even though she'd never had any formal training.
Yeah.
So, Kay, what did you have
I don't have anything. I need to be sent to the principal's office.
Too bad. Yeah, so it's like I said, Cherie did a great job of summarizing it for me because I was having a hard time getting all the things in an order that would follow along and make sense. But um, so at trial, Mitchell testified at his trial. He testified that he had masturbated at the scene while she was still alive, but that he did not have sex with her or kill her. Again, like I said, it was going to get even a little more disturbing. So we're not here to discuss the weird abnormalcies of a criminal's state of mind, but that is pretty weird, and frightening. And I'm also, I have no problem saying that Mitchell probably belongs in prison for the rest of his life, no doubt, but I'm not sure he should have been sent to death row for the reasons he was, or the reasons that he were. Yeah. Um, so so he said that he had masturbated at the scene, but that she was still alive. So weird. But the medical examiner had found no definitive evidence of sexual trauma on the victim's body, because besides the vaginal rape that had supposedly taken place, they also Joyce Gilchrist also said that there was anal sodomy had been committed as well. And so but the medical examiner said that there was no definitive evidence of sexual trauma on the victim's body. So
No.
that
So
makes the rape it's in and of itself questionable. Go ahead,
yeah,
Alice.
yeah. No, I was just going to say that. I mean, with the medical examiner saying that they found no trauma to the victim's anus or vagina. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, by what we've thingied and what we've heard is that if somebody has been raped or sodomized, there is like a tearing, because they're fighting it, they're resisting it, they're not wanting to do it. For there not to be any damage at the vagina or even the anus, then that rules out the sodomy. So why did he get thingied with the sodomy? That's because Gilchrist bitch opened her mouth and let her gums flap without having the evidence.
That's right. She was always letting her gums flap, though, wasn't she?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, oh. Well, all I can say is it's a good thing that number one, she got fired, and number two, that maybe she's just not around anymore to continue causing, you know, perpetuating her lies. But
well,
so
really, it's no, because our prodigy was still in the lab when Daniel was there.
that's exactly right. And that's why we're even talking about this book, is because of the legacy that was carried on or passed on to the current or formerly recently current crime lab and DOJ and all of that stuff. So that's why we're reading this book to start with. We were looking like, oh my gosh, this started way back in the 80s, probably
Yep.
before then, but this is what we have. Um, so the medical examiner said that he found no trauma to the victim's anus or vagina, but he did find areas of bruising around both hip bones, which he determined were caused by some blunt trauma, perhaps as a result of a sexual assault, but possibly not. So, he's not. The medical examiner is not saying that she was definitely sexually assaulted. Um, so, um, and I'm one who tends to, especially depending on credentials and curriculum vitae and whatnot, I tend to believe, for the most part, what a medical examiner says.
Yeah,
Much more so than what the likes of Joyce Gilchrist might have had to say. Um,
exactly.
right. So, Bob Macy, now of course, he's involved in this as well, but he wasn't handling this particular case. I guess I'm not exactly sure what his medical issues were, but he had some sort of medical issues going on, and so he had two of his assistants handling the case for him. So the jury found Robert, no, not Robert, Alfred
Alfred.
Brian Mitchell. The jury found Mitchell guilty of murder, rape, sodomy, which, remember, neither rape nor sodomy had been conclusively proven, armed robbery, and car theft. And he was sentenced to death. Plus, after he's dead, he's got to do another 170 years. So just so you're aware, once you've died in a death penalty, or once your death penalty is carried out in Oklahoma, you can still have to serve another 170 years. So be careful, kids.
You know why they do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But Kay, go ahead and please tell the one person that's watching us.
In case the death penalty cases get overturned or get commuted, in case the death penalty goes away.
Yeah.
But I had to read that twice. I really had to take a double take with that. I was like, wait a minute, he gets a death row and he gets 170 years, but if he's dead, he's not going to do 170 years. What the fuck?
Exactly. It just doesn't make any sense. But
no.
About as much as all the 300-year sentences,
right,
that you commonly find in. I can't remember recently. I think we were looking at some cases recently, and there was, what was the charge? And the guy got 300 years. It was something. Dang it, we need Cherie to pop in here. She'll remember.
She'll know. She's
all right. I can't complete a story, so just go without me. Go on.
Oh, stop it. Oh God, that's funny. I don't know why it's not letting me chat. You're funny. I'm gonna just say hello to a name I've never seen before. So hello, Don Rotten, and welcome to our little broadcast. So now here's just, because we like to keep things a little light, I guess, because the things that we're talking about are always so serious and depressing and whatnot. I just wonder if I didn't look any farther into Alfred Mitchell's case to find out if that was concurrent. Was the death penalty plus the 170 years, was that concurrent or was it consecutive? Because
do you know what that is? They were going to kill him on death row, then they were going to use a Ouija board to keep him here.
To keep him here to make the sentence rights consecutive. Oh God!
Oh my God!
I know. What can I say? We're so again, now that we've had some fun, he was found guilty of murder, rape, sodomy, armed robbery, and the car theft, and sentenced to death plus 170 years. So, and Kay was right on the money. It's pretty much, in case the death sentence gets overturned, then they still got him on 170 years, which, he's not going to live to, for that long anyway. So it's just a death sentence by amount of time in prison. His sentence was upheld by Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, and even though the judge in that case had concerns, and this is something else we've seen the pattern that we've seen from this book and in current cases that we know of in Oklahoma. So the fact that Gilchrist had found semen on the victim's body while the medical examiner and independent expert did not, it was just like poof, gone, out of sight, out of mind for the court. and he described it as just differing opinions among experts. Again, restating, Joyce Gilchrist, despite her claims, was not an expert, no formal training. So it was differing opinions among experts that the judges could not distinguish between. Also, the ADA stated that Gilchrist and the independent examiner had stated the same conclusions about the semen evidence, but that was not true either. Very little of anything that went on with the state was corroborated by outside or independent entities. So, but they were so brazen that they just felt like, well, we can lie about it. Nobody's going to double check. Nobody's going to check on us. Even if they do, they're going to believe us and not them, which has been what we've been seeing. So after an evidentiary hearing, the U.S. District Court overturned the rape and sodomy convictions in 1999 because, again, those were never proven. The judge found that Gilchrist knew there was DNA evidence that exonerated Mitchell, but withheld it from the defense and lied about it in her testimony. So just quickly recapping, the semen that was found inside of the victim was either that of her boyfriend, Taylor was his last name, Philip Taylor, which had been, according to him, a week earlier, or this other man that she had evidently had sex with. So, so the semen inside of the victim was not Mitchell's semen at all. And again, no proof of anal sodomy. So those things were overturned, and that's the very least I feel like that could have been done in Mitchell's favor. So that was overturned in 1991 or 1999, and the judge found that Gilchrist knew that there was no DNA evidence that there was DNA evidence that exonerated him, but that she had withheld it and lied about it in her testimony. And how this woman was able to lie so much once they started bringing her dirty lies to the surface, it's just mind-boggling to me that that they believe anything that she said. But again, Oklahoma, they are a power of they're like this powerful force that just has so much control that they get away with the stuff.
Yeah,
He also go ahead.
That takes it to the courts and things like that as well. You know what I mean? I mean, look at the previous chapters that we've looked at. I mean, with Bob Macy and Gilchrist, this has been going on through maybe the late 70s, the 80s. No, this one was in 1991. So, and then in 1999, it sounds like she's still in the same crime lab. You know? So, what the fuck is the courts all about? We're letting this person still continue, even though she's not qualified, she's getting things wrong. Surely they should realise that this is going to cost them even more money to sort it.
Right. But I don't feel like it's even about money for them. It's about power and ego, I think, more than anything else. And or at least it seems like that. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I just don't I don't know how they get away with what they get away with. But
No.
It's just mind-boggling.
It is. And I mean, if that's 1999, and I mean, look at what Daniel went through. You know what I mean? And that's over, 20, 30 years later? And the same shit is still happening.
Yep.
That's right. And with Timothy Henderson resigning and allegations swirling about him, that we know all the corruption that happened in Daniel's case. We see it because we've dug into that case. We see everything that happened. I mean, hopefully the OSBI is going to do a true investigation. And if they don't, we're going to have another 30 years of corruption here. I mean, they just give them a pass to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
but see, that's where I think the immunity comes into it as well, though, Kate. Okay, I mean, if they didn't have the immunity, if judges knew that they could get disbarred, their pensions taken off them, and everything like that, if they weren't the fair, impartial judge that they're supposed to be, and that prosecutors, even the DAs, even the defence, any lawyer whatsoever, if they knew that their ass was on the line, that their holiday homes would be affected, their benefits would be affected, their pension would be affected, their family would be affected, I guarantee you, 100% of them would think twice about what they're doing. You know, so the prosecutor immunity needs to get fucking rid of.
yeah.
Agreed.
I hope changes are coming.
I hope so too.
I mean, across the whole world, you know, wherever it is needed. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's just insane. It's just a level of criminality that we don't seem to have any choice over, really, and it's really, really frustrating.
And you know, another frustrating thing is, and I was one of these people, that it's really hard to get people to care about it because it's not happening to them.
Right.
They don't even want to look at things. Some people don't want to look at Daniel's case. I have good friends they know what a strong advocate I am for him. And they just shy away from the subject. They don't like things. They don't share them. It's just invisible to them. And those people are the problem too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you change that? They feel like, oh, if I take a stand about that, then, you know, my business will suffer for it. And in this culture, that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that a lot with the Chauvin trial. I've stopped watching it. I started watching it on YouTube and that, and just some of the comments in the chat that were going past and everything like that was unbelievable what they were saying, and the amount of people that still say that it wasn't his fault that George died, even though we seen it happening in front of your eyes, is disgusting in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, if it's there right in front of their eyes and they're still denying it, what is it going to take for them to actually open their eyes and listen? It's going to take something like this to happen to somebody in their family member or whatever, to be arrested and interrogated for so many hours without a lawyer and end up in the jail and having people like Taylor and Gilchrist fucking up their labs tests and everything like that, and then sending them to the jail for the 230 odd years that Daniel's be sent to jail. That's the only way they're going to listen, because then it's happened to them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree.
And the thing is that we don't want this to happen to other people. You know, that's what we want to work. That's what we're like doing our best to try to fix. Or education. Yes, it's such a big, and getting rid of this mentality that we have in the country right now of you know, there's just such a double standard. And we were talking about a certain attorney, a civil rights attorney, the other night in our show. You know how for all these, you know, and I think it was even you, Alice, that said, you know, what if these or Susan, what if it was reversed and this was you know, Daniel was a black person and these were all white women? You know, where would that same civil rights attorney still be on the case representing these accusers? You know, you
Yeah.
have to ask that question now because everybody's just got a double standard. And like you said, until it happens to them, and you know, we pray that it doesn't. But if it does, you know, that's when people start waking up. But we want to try to work on ways to bring more awareness to the lies of wrongful convictions. So, but back to getting back with the chapter a little bit. The they were talking about while Gilchrist said that she had found sperm in the victim's body that had the same blood type as both Mitchell and Taylor, the boyfriend. She never performed further testing to see who it belonged to. And remember, she also said that that sperm would not last more than 12 hours in a woman's body anyway, or a person's body, I guess I should say.
Jeez.
So, which is
You
just
need to tell her about Monica Lewinsky's
yeah,
dress.
exactly.
She,
After it had
I
been to
don't
the
think
dry
she heard
cleaners.
about it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just so ridiculous that she would say these things, and that the attorneys and the judges and the juries were just buying it. But they did. It's whatever. We can't change that. But but she never performed any kind of testing to see whose it was. And Gilchrist was when she was using blood, or trying to determine the DNA, from sperm or semen, she would often use the ABO blood typing. And I'm no Dr. Silkman, and someday he's going to be on our show, but um, I don't think that you can definitively say that one person that somebody's sperm or semen is present because when it matches the same blood type as the victim. You can't, I mean, you don't know whose is whose, at that
Yeah.
point. And so but again, it was easier to just pass that over and pretend like it hadn't been said than it was to you know do more digging and more testing. um in addition, the investigators failed to thoroughly investigate the victim's sex life. So there was no victimology done. Besides just their sex life, there was no victimology done on Elaine Scott. And then Cherie even says the same thing. She said that reminds her of the Avery case, Stephen Avery's case. That there was no victimology done on Teresa Halbach either. And you just cannot successfully, truthfully, and honestly and definitively um, do a case like this without doing a victimology on the victim because it
Yeah.
matters. And this is not me trying to victim shame or victim blame or whatever the whatever people are trying to. That is not what I'm trying to do. Just because we're looking at the victim's lifestyle, comings and goings, where they work, when they work, who they socialize with, and what you have to know those things. And because in a lot of times that doing that victimology gives you many, many more avenues to look at and to investigate. um, and where they were able to say that there was the semen of two different men in the victim's body, but not her but it wasn't her boyfriend's that they found, and it wasn't Mitchell's. Then who's this other guy? Who's this DNA sample from this other guy? Should we
Yeah.
be investigating that guy? Probably. But that wasn't done. That was not done because they had their sights. Bob Macy, even though he didn't take the case, he was the puppet
Oh,
master.
he had his finger in the pie, big time,
Yeah,
guaranteed.
yeah. He always did. He always did. He always had to, he always had to make comments or something. So, um, and some of the things we've learned in this book, some of the things that Macy said publicly were outrageous,
Yeah.
outrageous comments. So it's hard to take him seriously either, knowing what we know, which isn't a lot comparatively, but knowing what we know, it's just outrageous that he said the things he did and got away with it. Um, so there was no victimology done, and they tunnel vision, isn't that what that's called? Tunnel vision, when they just they focus in on one person and that's it, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what was going on here. The jury never heard that Mitchell's uh, DNA or semen or whatever was eliminated, that he was eliminated as a donor of some of those semen stains, specifically the ones that were found inside the victim's vagina. Um, uh, they did not hear that the FBI analysts that had been sent out to had excluded Mitchell, but included her boyfriend as the donor of semen in her panties. They never heard that. And since the boyfriend was not a suspect, further testing was not done to absolutely confirm it was her boyfriend's. So it was just a half-assed investigation in all truthfulness. And that was how Gilchrist supported her testimony on the stand, that the results were inconclusive. But her own handwritten notes stated that the sample from the panties matched the boyfriend. Those notes were not turned over to the defense. I don't know for 100% sure, but seems to me like that should be considered a Brady violation. But I don't know. That's my. I don't know all the details of the Brady case to know for sure. But they were never turned over to the defense. It should have been a Brady violation in my simpler mind.
Yeah.
Um,
No, we've done enough. We've done enough on the Avery case and Brendan's case and everything like that, Rhonda, to justify to say that yes, that sounds like a Brady violation.
yeah, I think so. I think we know enough. So we we couldn't hear that, Kay. You're fine. Um, so so that there was in our opinion, a whole Brady violation that occurred as well. And I don't recall, honestly, when I was digging a little deeper into Mitchell's case, I don't recall if that was used in any of his appeals. Sorry, I'd have to. Um, I do have some links I can be dropping too. I'm struggling to do more than one thing at a time here, but I'll get some links for you in a minute and drop in where you can read some more of the details about Mitchell's case. Um, so the U.S. Um, let's see, she stated that she had turned everything over to the DA's office, and here's Gilchrist blaming everybody else. She said she turned everything over to the DA's office, and what happened after that was it was out of her hands. She had no choice, no idea what they were doing with what she gave them. But she's a liar. Um, the U.S. District Court judge also pointed out that the ADAs obscured the FBI's and the independent examiner's results while highlighting Gilchrist's results during the trial. And that was what they did. And that's what they still do. That's what they did in Daniel's case. So, well, not that anything was sent out independently, but, talking up Elaine Taylor about what a wonderful uh, analyst she was and everything. So, it's really the same kind of thing. There just wasn't any, there wasn't any real, there was no outside independent labs or anything looking at any of the DNA evidence in Daniel's case. So there's that difference as well, which, by the way, again, I am not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, I'm not any of those things, but in such a high profile case as was Daniel's, you would think that I would like to have seen the defense counsel request something like that, but it didn't happen. Anyway, back to Mitchell. So the rape and the sodomy convictions were overturned, but the death penalty was upheld, which so the victim was murdered, and Mitchell agreed, took the plea that he would agree to the murder, but normally the death penalty wouldn't have been. The death penalty isn't always given in a murder case. And once they took the rape and sodomy off the table, once they got rid of that, that should have changed his death penalty ruling, but it didn't. The death penalty was upheld. And shortly after that ruling, Gilchrist was expelled from the Association of the Crime Scene Reconstruction. Now, she has a whole reason why that happened. She wants to say that it was because it was during this trial and she let it lapse and blah blah blah. But we learned earlier in the book that she was never even a member of the ACR, so, or the ACSR. So more of her lies. In 2001, the 10th Circuit overturned the death penalty sentence, but upheld the murder conviction due to the prosecution's misleading of jurors and hiding exculpatory evidence. But side note, they were never the prosecution, the state, they were never held accountable for hiding the exculpatory evidence. So, um, so while Mitchell admitted to masturbating in the presence of and that some of the semen outside of her body was his, Oklahoma sexual assault requires penetration. So, however, the prosecution's testing focused on the evidence pointing toward a sexual element of the crime rather than the evidence that pointed toward murder alone. So, instead of just looking at the blood on the sneakers or the pants, they were focusing on the semen found inside the victim's body and on the outside as well. Which, by the way, weirdly, I don't even know how to feel about it, but it's not a crime to, masturbate, I guess, when somebody's dying. I don't know. I just think it's weird that was never seems to have been addressed, except that the state said, well, there's semen, his semen's on the outside of her body. So, whatever semen's on the inside of her body is his too. I don't know how they justify what they do. So the victim's family, very, very angry. And that video that I showed you at the beginning of the show was their 17 years later after they had, because to this day, even to this day, they are still trying to get him to be executed, to get Mitchell executed for the rape, sodomy, and murder of their daughter. And you know what? I'm not even mad at the parents because they don't know any better. In fact, I believe somewhere along the way, her mother, I believe her name was Ann Scott, says, that she believed that she doesn't know anything about crime lab analysts or anything like that, or what they do, or chemists or anything. But she said, she said that Gilchrist was straightforward and honest, and even though they didn't know how good of a chemist she was, because they had no frame of reference. To them, she was great. She spoke. We know from previous chapters that Joyce Gilchrist spoke very professionally and very knowledgeable on the stand. And when you're talking about grieving parents who are already predisposed to believing whatever the state is saying and whatever the witnesses on the state side are saying, of course they don't know any different. So I'm not mad at them. I will forever and always blame the state for it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly the same in the in Teresa's case. You know, I mean, the amount of crap that the state has put onto the Hallbacks. I mean, they still believe Stephen and Brendan are guilty, even though the amount of proof that's out there that we can actually document and link and everything like that proves otherwise.
yeah.
They're still adamant that it was Stephen that done it, and that's all because of what the state fed them and the press conference and the media coverage and everything like that. I mean, a lot of that's got to do with it as well, because the same thing happened here with the Luke and Jodie case.
Uh-huh.
It was, but I mean, that way, there wasn't a victimology done there either, you know. But the difference between Teresa's case and Jodie's case is they went, they done part of the victimology and went for the boyfriend. You know, they always say that when it comes to deaths and assaults like that, the person that's probably most likely done it is somebody that they know. So a family friend or a family member or a boyfriend or, you know, an ex-husband or something like that. So they look at they have to try and rule out all the people first. But
Right.
that didn't happen in Teresa's case, you know. So then it all comes back to the victimology of things again.
Because we know if we had done a victimology, if it had been us that had, you know, investigated Teresa's case, we would have done a victimology, and we would have found that there's well, I shouldn't say countless, but at least 3 or 4 Denny suspects that were never even considered, never even
Yep.
considered. So yeah, it's just really, folks, victimology is a huge part of an investigation of this kind. And I just think if it's not done, I don't think the case can be heard until it's done. But again, we're not the ones in charge. So um, I feel bad for the parents for what they've gone through. If we allow, Cherie says, if we allow our public officials to lie and use faulty evidence to convict someone we don't like, they will also be able to use the same tactics to convict us and those that we love. Like you were saying, Alice, you know, it puts all of us in a horrible, almost frightening situation. You know, at any time in our lives, or our family, you know, our loved ones, or friends for that matter.
Dawn, I actually think it's a bit of both. Dawn is saying, is it incompetence or corruption? I think it's both.
I would say definitely corruption for sure, and I think there is some incompetence. But I really don't like giving the prosecution or the state. I don't like giving them that out. You know, that they make, because I refuse to believe in any way that in Stephen and Brendan's case that it was just incompetence or um, you know, a bad investigation. The same with this one. I refuse to believe it when they're not looking at other um, points that need to be looked at. For instance, other suspects. If you're not looking at other suspects, then it's not about incompetence so much. It's about, we have somebody in mind that we believe did this, or that we want to be found guilty of this. And that's how whether they're planting anything or not, I feel like that's how they're twisting it so that the person that they want to be guilty is found guilty. And we know that this is what Joyce Gilchrist did, and Bob Macy. There's no way they're not stupid people. They were very intelligent people, and they used their intelligence to twist the minds of those who were the most vulnerable at the time. So you're right. It is incompetence and corruption, but I think corruption outweighs the incompetence.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. Parts there is incompetence, like the common sense areas, the ones where
Yeah.
you really should use your common bloody sense.
Right.
They parts
Yeah.
are incompetent, because it's incompetent not to use your common sense in a situation.
Right.
When it comes to certain things, especially like crime and things like that. I mean, to me, just taking Laboob, for instance,
Uh-huh.
in the Avery case, he only tested 3 of the 6 swabs
Right.
that he should have tested. To me, that's a bit of incompetence,
Right.
because his common sense tells him he's supposed to be an expert. So his common sense should tell him, no, just because you've not got any match in the 3 swabs doesn't mean to say you're not going to get a match in the next 3 swabs. So
Or the
you need
very
to test
last swab.
exactly. So you need to test the 3 swabs to rule out everything, and that's just sheer incompetence. But then when you take in the factor of how the state went about getting Laboob in and everything like that, that leads it to the corruption.
Right.
And he even had the audacity to testify in court that he could positively state that none of the 6 samples had EDTA when he only tested 3. What?
Yep,
Yeah.
I mean, how
yep,
does that work?
yep,
Yeah. And I guess that's where, with the incompetence part, that I get the reason I give so much weight to corruption instead is because if and when these cases that we are all engrossed in break, and we can somebody can prove the innocence of the men that we're talking about. um, I don't want the state to be able to come back and say, "Oh, we just didn't know. We thought we were doing everything, but we didn't. So you can't hold us accountable because we did everything we thought we could." You know,
yep, yep.
I don't want them to get a pass for that, I guess is what
No,
that's the only reason I try to kind of cut the incompetence thing out of because we know what's going to happen anyway. I mean, when these cases blow up, and hopefully all 3 of the men, Daniel, Stephen, and Brendan, will be, I'm hoping that this is the year for all 3 of them. But, I can just hear it now. I can hear all of the state people, well, with the exception maybe of Ken Kratz. I think he's planning to throw a few people under the bus, but I think he's got a list, a short, maybe long list of people he plans to throw under the bus. But at any rate, everybody's going to try to throw everybody under the bus, of course. But
yep,
I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a lot of, people. Oh, we tried. We did the best we could with what we had. Well, no, you didn't, because you didn't go try to have anything else but what you had. So
yep,
you can't say that you were ignorant of the facts when you didn't look for the facts, or you created facts in adverse to what you had. So, the adverse to what the reality was. So, oh gosh. So we can kind of start wrapping this up a little bit, this chapter. In two in 2020, so just last year, Mitchell petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari. The questions presented were: one, given this court's prior ruling that the text of Oklahoma's heinous, atrocious, or cruel death penalty aggravator is unconstitutionally vague, is the state applying a valid narrowing construction to the statute when all murders are subject to the aggravator, save those few in which the victim dies instantly upon the fatal blow? And two, do shifting attitudes about the death penalty and new science showing the absence of meaningful differences in cognition among young adults below the age of 21 compel this court to bar the execution of those who committed crimes shy of their 21st birthday? And the Supreme Court denied review of the questions that were presented. And Cherie is an amazing researcher and finder of facts. She's quick and she's good. She says, wrapping up in her notes, she said, from what I have read about regarding the evidence, it is not 100% certain that Alfred Mitchell committed this murder. In my opinion, the death penalty should not be employed since we are almost never 100% certain. People are too prone to mistakes and intentional wrongdoing in these cases, and once someone has been executed, it cannot be undone if mistakes and wrongdoing are uncovered down the road. And I think that's an excellent way. Like I said, Cherie, putting in uh, that last bit of her opinion, I think is I would agree with her opinion. So wholeheartedly. Um, so let's see. Don Rotten says, incredible incompetence is just their excuse. Appalling. Yeah, it's their, to me, that's what it is. It's an excuse. And I never want to see that get used as a reason for why they should not be held accountable when the truth comes out in different things. So, I don't know. That's about all that I have for this chapter. Uh, Alice or Kay, do you have anything you want to add? Or
I don't.
okay.
More of the same here. More of the same from Oklahoma County.
Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't stopped, has it? Just since they got rid of Gilchrist and Macy have, met their maker. It hasn't changed. It's just carried on, and I think I don't know. I think the corruption just gotten deeper and deeper.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's been going on since 1991 and we're in 2020, the 21 actually, then I mean, that's what, like 30 years, 20, 30 years, and still nothing has changed. They're still getting away with this. The whole thing needs to be overhauled. The crime lab, there needs to be new, not necessarily young, but if somebody has been trained by Gilchrist, or for that matter, Gilchrist 2.0 as in Taylor, then they need to be taken out of the equation completely, and they need to get new recruits in there that have had nothing to do with the past before anything will change, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it can't be what do I want to call it? It can't be done by David Praters and AGA Mike Hunters and things like that. It has to be independent, and I'm even going to go as far as to say the FBI, not just the OSBI, but the FBI, because it's that corrupt, in my opinion. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Prater and Giger or Geiger or whatever he's called, there is no point in trying to do anything while they're still in office, because they were as corrupt back then, they're as corrupt now. It's a simple. It's the same sort of generation
yeah,
that they've been brought up with. If they've got that gut feeling, I mean, a lot of people do say, "I go with your gut," but there's certain things that you can't go with your gut for. And when there's evidence coming out that these people are actually innocent, and it can be proven that they're innocent with DNA, or the case is just fabricated, like the cases that we've been looking into. I mean, especially Bloody Daniel's case. It needs a complete overhaul. And I don't think it's going to get anywhere if these people for that generation are still there, because the same thought patterns and the same gut feelings and everything like that are all still going to be there.
Well,
right.
the governor has an awesome power, and I mean, he has a few in relation to being effective and making a change with all of this, but governors, they just don't use the power. They
Right.
really don't. I mean, I'm shocked that he called for the OSBI to investigate. Um,
Yeah.
that's a start, but is that just show? Is the OSBI corrupt as well?
That's what I'm saying. We can't even trust I don't even trust the OSBI at this point. I'd rather just go right straight to the big guns in Quantico.
I
Just
mean,
bring in the guys.
when you get screwed in an investigation, and then you get screwed in a trial, and then you get screwed in an appeal, and then of course the Supreme Court's so busy hearing all these Yahoo cases, all this crap that could just dissolve off the face of the earth, that they can't really give relief to innocent people who are suffering in prison. And where did the judges from the where did the judges from the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals come from? Where did the judges from the Oklahoma Supreme Court come from?
Yeah, they all
All
come
that,
from the bottom. DA's office usually.
it's just, if the whole thing is corrupt, then people are just spending money, wasting their lives researching, trying to make a difference. And when it's not going to make a difference, this has to end.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Completely agreed.
Sick of it.
Yeah, it is. It's really, it's just depressing. It gets so, you feel defeated, like in ways that you just can't. Ugh. But I guess when we feel the most defeated is when we have to just jump in and really get even more serious about it. I think that's part of the evil plan, is to just get everybody who's, you know, bucking against the system, wear them down, wear them out, just just drag this out as long as we can, and they'll get tired of screwing around, and they'll just leave us alone. And I
I
think
mean,
that's
in Oklahoma, are your judges elected or are they picked?
So judges, like Stitt, the governor appoints judges, and judges run for office, and then they really call it retention. So you're voting for the judge to be retained. I tried to explain this 2 weeks ago or 3, and I did it just as poor a job. That was a really stupid explanation.
oh
Oh my gosh. Okay.
well, and but what you're saying is true, though. They get put in for one reason or another, like they're filling an empty seat, or something to that effect. And if somebody doesn't run against them, then they just retain the seat. And if somebody is running against them, then I believe it does go to an election, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I don't live in Oklahoma, so
Yeah, if no one runs against them, their name is still on the ballot. It's as retention.
right.
Right.
That's kind of how I see it. So
See, that's the other thing, is that until I got involved in all of this, I didn't really understand how important researching a judge and campaigning for judges, or especially district attorneys. I had no idea. And that's how aloof I was. And I think a lot of people are
But
like,
that's like us all though, Kay. I mean, before we started on like the Avery case and everything like that, I guarantee you every one of us didn't have a clue with what this meant or that meant, or anything like that. But because of the cases that we're researching into and everything like that, we are getting a better understanding of it. And that's why we can do things like this to try and get it out into the open, because we're just layman people, we're no psychologists, we're no a lawyer, we're no, well, with the exception of Cherie. But she's a good lawyer, she's on her side.
Yes.
But that, I mean, and I think that's why we need to keep doing these kind of things. We need to keep shouting Daniel's name. We need to keep shouting Stephen and Brendan's name, and now even Luke's name. And I mean, that happened on my doorstep. And you've heard me many, many times on many chats saying, "Oh, that wouldn't happen in the UK," and "Oh, that wouldn't happen in the UK," And we're looking more and more into Luke and Jodie's case. It has just gave me a slap in the face with a wet fish, and it's opening my eyes that maybe my justice system isn't as good as what I bloody think it is.
Yeah. Yep. And that goes back to what you said earlier about um you know this could happen to anyone.
Yep.
So it could happen to anyone, and it happened in your backyard, and without you even realizing it, because of the cover up mostly, and because it was never talked about. And so now it has happened to you, and now you're even more outraged than you were when you got involved in Stephen and Brendan and Daniel's cases. So
Yep.
yeah, it doesn't matter
Exactly.
where you're at.
Yep.
It's all the same.
It seems to be. It seems to be everywhere. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've never thought that my police and that are saints. I lived in Glasgow, for crying out loud, so they're definitely no saints. But I thought we were better than
Yeah.
what I have been seeing in America, and things like that, with the media pressure and the corruption with the between the DAs and the police and everything like that. And the same things just exactly happened here. Poor Luke was crucified in the media. It was on every TV channel. It was in every newspaper. It was on every radio station to here to England. And I think that's what needs to be put on a curb as well, as the amount of media and things like that. But then if you've got police like here, because we think this is what's happened with Luke and Jodie's case, is the the information that the media was getting, there is no way they could have got that information unless it was coming from the police. Just for example, things that were in his house and taken from his house, none of the media were allowed in his house. So where were the media getting this information from? And then in Daniel's case, it was all around about the riots and things like that in Ferguson. So that was more like a political case. It shouldn't be doing to that sort of thing. It should be, as you say, 100%, well, not necessarily 100, but without a shadow of a doubt, you've got to find these people innocent or guilty. And if you've got that one wee doubt whatsoever, then you shouldn't ruin somebody's life like that.
Agreed. Agreed 100%. I have several links. Excuse me. I have several links that I had ready for the show tonight, and I was a little bit late getting them out to Catnet, and I am guessing that she's probably lost a connection or having internet problems or device issues. I will try to figure out how to get the links into the description of tonight's show, because there is some interesting information that I think the viewers would benefit from reading about this case, particularly with Alfred Mitchell. And so I think with all that said, Alice, Kay, you guys have contributed a lot of great information and opinions, and I appreciate it so much. So, unless anybody has anything else to add, or unless there is any questions from the two people in chat, um, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Next week's chapter is chapter 8, and you guys have heard me reference this multiple times. It's been the most difficult chapter for me. It's called uh, oh crap, I just a robbery gone wrong. And it's a really, really sad case about a death penalty that was carried out and how it affected the family of the executed, of one of the executed people in the case. And that particular, one of the particular family members in the case is still advocating in the death penalty situation in Oklahoma. Um, Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. I welcome to our channel. I don't know if you've been a different name before in commenting or not. If you haven't already, I do a show on Tuesday nights um, that usually, most of the time, well, always it revolves around the case of Daniel Holztclaw. So if you haven't yet, check out the other videos that I've done with on Tuesday nights, and then we do this one every Thursday night. It's a bookcast about the book Death and Justice. So if you're not familiar with that, and if you're not familiar with any of it, come to our Discord. And Sheree, I don't know if you're able to right offhand get the link for Discord, but join our Discord because we have a lot going on over there too, and a lot. So join us over there too, Don, and we would be happy to, share as much information with you about Daniel Holtzclaw's case and what's going on with that. With that, please try really hard not to miss us next Thursday. The inconsistency is hopefully being remedied, and it's all my fault. Well, there was a bit of a conflict last Thursday night because another YouTube channel that I have the utmost respect for had something very, very impromptu and important to share on the same night, and so we just didn't do our. Thank you so much, Alice. Don, if you want to follow that link there in the chat for Daniel's Truth. Oh, great. Oh, well, there, go ahead. Thank you. Definitely come to Discord because we got a lot of things that we've got posted in there already. And, whenever we get the chance, we like to talk to people in the general discussion room about Daniel's case. So try not to miss us next week. We will definitely be here for Chapter 8, A Robbery Gone Wrong. I think you'll find it fascinating, heart-wrenching, and very interesting to say the least. So until then, we will see you on Tuesday. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and talk about our channel so that we can get more awareness for Daniel. So until Tuesday, peace out.